Who would have thought that the Prime Minister's visit to the Lakshadweep would lead to a full-blown diplomatic spat between India and the Maldives? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. The Prime Minister shared breathtaking images of his visit to Lakshadweep. These images were dramatic and they brought home the beauty of the Lakshadweep Islands. Nobody in India would have anticipated that they would lead to smarmy and derogatory remarks about both India and the Prime Minister in the Maldives. As those remarks came, the social media backlash was also equally furious. For the last 2 or 3 days, the top trend on this story has been boycott Maldives. And many online travel booking sites have actually come forward to talk about cancelling bookings to the Maldives. There are models and celebrities who are talking about cancelling trips and cancelling even work assignments. Bollywood has waded into these stormy diplomatic waters. Everyone from Amitabh Bachchan to Akshay Kumar has now spoken about exploring India's own tourist destinations. Indian tourists have remained the top tourist market for the Maldives. That depends heavily on tourism. 28% of the GDP of Maldives is actually drawn from tourism. As all of this is happening, the Maldives envoy was summoned by the foreign ministry. Three of the ministers and the officials in the Maldives government that had led with the derogatory remarks about the Prime Minister have been suspended. But the diplomatic waters that are choppy have still not stilled. As all of this is happening, the Maldives leadership is in China. Now remember, the new government is seen to be more China-leaning than India-leaning. So there's perhaps a lot more going on behind what seemed to be a Maldives versus Lakshadweep social media battle. To make sense of it all, we're joined on the program today by diplomatic veteran, senior former ambassador Dilip Sinha. We hope also to be able to connect with one or two voices from Maldives. But in any case, let's try and understand what's actually going on here. Ambassador Sinha, you must have seen many conflagrations in your lifetime. But did you ever imagine that innocuous, beautiful images of the Prime Minister in Lakshadweep would create the kind of storm that they have? Do explain to our audience what's going on here.
Well, as you put it, Barkha, this is really very, very strange because there clearly is a lot that must have happened before, in the sense in the Maldives during the elections, where the campaign was seen as a campaign in which on the ballot paper there was India and China written. And the present government in the Maldives seems to believe that it has come to power on the mandate to spoil relations with India, to break with India, and improve relations with China. This appears to be the mindset behind the leadership in the Maldives today, because the action of the Prime Minister of India was quite innocuous. He went to an island in India and he tweeted that the island is very pretty. Now, it just so happens that the set of islands, the Lakshadweep Islands, are on the same geographical formation in the Indian Ocean or the Arabian Sea as the Maldives. It is the Lakshadweep is north of the same archipelago, and the Maldives come to the south of it. Just about 70 nautical miles is the distance between the two of the closest islands. But there was no reference to the Maldives in this. But all of a sudden, some of the leaders, some of the ministers in the Maldives started tweeting in language that is completely unacceptable. And you cannot have ministers calling the Prime Minister of any country the kind of names that they have used in these tweets. So there was natural to be a reaction from India, and the reaction was both in terms of the government, which summoned the High Commissioner, and also the people, because we live in an age of the social media now, and people start reacting. Some celebrities reacted, and the obvious reaction was, we will stop going to Maldives on tourism. And India provides the largest number of tourists going to the Maldives. So this has really become a very childish kind of a thing, where there is a big country like India, which obviously will be seen to be as if it's bullying a small country. And yet for India, it is not just a question of it's a very important question that Prime Minister cannot be insulted in the way in which it has been by government officials. But in addition to this, the larger geopolitical situation which you have here of China's desire to find a presence in this region, especially keeping in mind that it seems to have lost out in Sri Lanka, where the Sri Lankan government has said that it will not allow scientific ships to dock in Sri Lankan ports. That was seen as a major victory for India because China had been sending these scientific ships to use Sri Lanka as a base, and now they must be looking for a base for their ships. And the fact that the Maldives has recently cancelled the agreement that it had with India to do a hydrographic survey of the territorial waters of the Maldives seems to fit into this geopolitical game. So, in addition to this game of tourists canceling their programs and tour agencies calling off bookings, you have this larger geopolitical game that is playing out in this region. So it makes it both at one level very puerile, at the other level extremely important politically.
And that's the point, right? On the surface it seems to be a silly reaction and a racist reaction from the Maldives, derogatory, insulting, but at its heart, is this about a new government in Maldives trying to steer the country away from India towards China? As we speak, the Maldives leadership is in China. That's the first question. And the second question is, do you think these three officials who made these derogatory remarks about the prime minister, very personalized slurs, do you think that they were instructed to do so, or do you think that they genuinely made a mistake? Because two of them have been suspended.
Well, they have been suspended because the reaction in India was extremely strong, and obviously, and within Maldives also, when the Vice President, Mr. Nasheed, who's supposed to have come to your program, he himself tweeted recently, I think yesterday or so,
Yes.
criticizing the government and these officials for using this kind of language. So there's obviously a lot of criticism within Maldives also of this kind of behavior, which is completely unacceptable. I mean, you can criticize a country. It is very normal for neighboring leaders of India to criticize India, but this kind of personal, completely unacceptable language is should be condemned by everybody. And I hope that it didn't come at the instance of the newly elected president of Maldives. But the fact is that it's the environment that the new president has built in the country, where he's seeing his election as a snub to India and a kind of a re-independence of Maldives from Indian control, which again is extremely odd because India has never tried to dominate over the Maldives in any way. In fact, all through these years, India has been helping Maldives, and India at one time rescued the Maldives from a bunch of gunmen who had invaded Maldives. So, and the issue that the Maldives is making of this Indian army personnel, there's 75 personnel over there, and they are required for some equipment that is being maintained over there for the Maldivian army, and that's been clarified by some Maldivians themselves. So it's very peculiar that the government has built this kind of an environment where it is trying to project India as some kind of an evil neighbor, and China as a savior of the Maldives.
Yeah. I was,
Chinese
I, I,
politics.
I was going to ask you about this army, the military personnel. 75, as you mentioned, and yet one of the election promises, as it were, of this new president was, we're going to make sure that they leave. Now, do you see the China imprint? What's actually going on here? What's going on beyond the Lakshadweep versus Maldives spat?
Well, this is very clearly, you see the fingerprints of China all over the place. Even in the kind of language that is being used, I see a Global Times kind of language being used over here. It's the Global Times that uses this kind of language for foreign leaders when it wants to attack them. You have a similar language being used here. China has been trying to get bases around in this region. We know of in Myanmar they have done that. In Sri Lanka they have had some setback. Now they're looking for a place nearby, and they'll try and do this in the Maldives. We know how Chinese politics operates. We've seen recently how they have invested huge amounts of money in the business of Trump and Biden's son. So you have China plays around with its big money. It has deep pockets, and it uses the money to influence local politics in countries. If it can try and do that in the US and Australia and Canada and Britain, then Maldives is an extremely small country. Even a small amount of change from China will affect the politics of this country. So it's quite obvious that China has tried to influence the party and mold the leaders in the way in which it molds its own leaders to become hostile to India and attack not only its policies but also its leaders personally.
What do you think in this circumstance? What should be the response of India? There has been a societal response with all of Bollywood's top stars, from Amitabh Bachchan to Akshay Kumar. Akshay Kumar was holidaying in the Maldives a few days ago, but that's okay. How Maldives has been a very favored destination of many of the sort of wealthier Indians. But today, in the last 24 hours, we've seen everybody from Bachchan to Akshay Kumar to you name it, and they've tweeted about exploring Indian destinations. The subtext is clear. We don't accept what the Maldivians have done, and we will punish you commercially. You have Ease My Trip, an online booking website, travel website, saying we're canceling bookings. You have models saying we had professional shooting assignments, we're not going. Now, how far can this go? What is the rapprochement in this conversation? Like, what happens next, according to you?
This is a very difficult situation for us. Maldives is a very close neighbor. It has been a very friendly neighbor, and there is no reason for us to uh, make things any worse than they have already gotten. Uh, we must also remember that India is a very large country as compared to Maldives, and any kind of hardline policy will be seen internationally as bullying a very
Mhm.
small country. And that we have to be very careful about because financially, I don't think we can harm Maldives very much, especially if it has China's backing, and there are tourists coming in from other regions as well. China and Russia are the number two and number three providers of tourists to the Maldives. So it is not as if we cannot harm Maldivian economy, but there's no reason for us to do it. As I said, this is the action of one particular group of people who have come to power in the Maldives now. We have to look at a larger policy of our relationship with the people of the Maldives. The party that was in power till very recently, all its leaders have gone against the government. So we have to look at that constituency in that country and try and build on that. We cannot obviously do anything about how the people react, people who are canceling their holidays. But certainly the government should behave in a manner in which it treats the Maldives as a friendly country, which has unfortunately fallen in the hands of a bunch of inexperienced, perhaps hostile people. But keeping the larger picture in mind, I think we should go about it very carefully in this and try and ensure that we do not lose the sympathy of the other political parties in the Maldives and ensure that the key point that we have to look at here is that our security should not be undermined by anybody,
Yeah.
certainly not by a non-Indian Ocean country like China coming into the picture. And here, I think we can coordinate our action with other countries, whether it is neighboring countries like Sri Lanka or it is a country like the US. Remember, the US Secretary of State called up the Maldivian foreign minister a day or two before they were supposed to go to China. So other countries are also concerned about China coming into the situation here. So we should exercise patience, go about it carefully, so that the pressure is built up on the Maldives very carefully and slowly, and not in a ham-handed way. We must also appreciate that Maldives has done well. It has the highest per capita income. It has very limited resources, and yet it has built an economy based on tourism. So we should appreciate that fact also, that a small country in South Asia has a very high per capita income, and there's no reason for us to
But but
undermine that
but but here's
prosperity of.
but here's the problem. The problem is that those who made the derogatory remarks about about our prime minister were officials in the government. They were deputy ministers, and they were not trolls. They were not random public. You see, anyone is free as a citizen of a free country to say something about anybody else. But when they are people in the government, then they have to, the government of India has to respond accordingly. Now, are these suspensions enough? Should this matter end here? Or do you think that we should be looking for something more concrete? Like an apology at the highest level, a phone call from the president to the prime minister, something more?
Well, I think the suspension should be allowed, should be insisted upon, that these people should be removed from the government.
Yeah.
That should really be enough. I don't think an apology would be forthcoming from the president. That would be asking for too much from this. I think we should let this lie if the three ministers are removed from government, and then we have to see how the government behaves. But the larger and the more important issue is the issue of security of Maldives giving facilities to China. There we should put our foot down and say that no neighboring country can fool around with our security. And there, if they do that, then they will have the heavy hand of India falling on them.
In that context, I want to ask you, a recent Global Times editorial actually spoke cheekily about triangular cooperation between India, China, and the Maldives, which is obviously not going to happen. When you talk about China's foot fingerprints all over this and how the key concern should be India's security interests, where would your immediate focus be?
I would focus on the whole of the region. I mean, it is whether it is Maldives or it is Sri Lanka or it is the Bay of Bengal, Myanmar's the Bay of Bengal coast of Myanmar. All these regions, China is not a country of this region, and there is no reason for China to start trying to come into this region. We have our littoral countries in this region. They can take care of the Indian Ocean. There are problems. There have been issues of piracy, etc. But the countries of the region can take care of these problems. So there is no reason why China should try and start putting its foot into this region. It has created enough problems for the countries of South China Sea. We do not want China in this region. So that is the point where we should be very firm that the countries of this region, if they start giving naval bases to China, then that will be seen as a hostile act by us.
And do you think that could happen, that Maldives could actually think of giving a naval base, its land as a naval base to China?
Well, the only important island they have is down south, Gan, the island of Gan, which was used at one time by Britain. Otherwise, they can, I suppose, they can't really give a naval base because the islands are not conducive to that. Yeah. But the very fact that ships will keep coming in and going out so close to India will be uncomfortable for us and be unsettling for us. So we have to look at that, even if it's not a regular base that is being given, because that's extremely difficult given the geological situation of the islands. But even if ships keep coming in and going out, it will be seen as a hostile intent by us.
So I think, as you summed up very well, Ambassador Sinha, it's simultaneously a puerile spat with very serious geopolitical fault lines and fissures at its heart. Thank you for explaining it so well to us. We had hoped to have our guests from Maldives. They were unable to connect, but next time, and we'll have you back as well. Thank you so much, sir, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. Mojo Story has always made a commitment to its viewers to go to where the story is. And as you can see here, we are at the epicenter of the Israel war on Gaza. We are right at the front line, about 1 mile from the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli military gets ready with its tanks and its gunners to begin its final frontal assault that will take troops into Gaza. As we said, we are not like other organizations. We believe in giving you all sides of the story objectively and as much as possible from the ground. And that's exactly what we're doing here, covering the biggest global story today from the epicenter of the war zone. So please, we need your support. Support us, become a Mojo member, subscribe to us, spread the word, and thank you for your support.